First up is Bliss Spores. Bliss Spores grants a plus 1d6 bonus to attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws until long rest. This powerful condition can be acquired by completing the quest Defeat the Duergar Intruders. Only the first part of this two-part quest chain needs to be completed for the condition. Just slay the Duergar down by the lake. You don't actually have to slay Nere. As of patch 8, the condition appears to only be given to the character who initiates dialogue with Spaw to complete the quest, where previously it would apply to your whole party, which perhaps was too powerful. A 1d6 bonus to ability checks is absolutely amazing, so you'll definitely want to try to get this during a time when you know you're not going to long rest for a while. And next up is Glut's Shield of Faith. After you slay Glut in the Shattered Sanctum, be sure to pick up her corpse, because if you bring it to Sovereign Gut, you can have him reanimate Glut. Glut as a Spore Servant will have Shield of Faith, which grants plus 2 AC and lasts until long rest, but it doesn't cost a spell slot and it doesn't require concentration. This means it's a quasi-permanent plus 2 AC condition for your whole party for as long as you have access to Spore Servant Glut. And next up is Refreshed, a condition that increases your maximum health by 10 hit points. Not to be confused with temporary hit points, this condition acts like the spell Aid, actually increasing your maximum hit points until long rest, making this a great condition to have. To get this condition, all you need to do is drink from Auntie Ethel's well. Whether it's the Putrid Bog or the Sunlit Wetlands, you'll get this condition. Interestingly though, there is another way to get this condition, the Succulent Pear. The Succulent Pear can be found on a Barbed Bulrush and will grant Refreshed for 1 turn. However, this version of Refreshed doesn't appear to do anything, and it only lasts 1 turn. After drinking from Auntie Ethel's well, the next morning you will wake up with nauseated, which makes you vulnerable to psychic and acid damage until next long rest. So you'll want to long rest immediately after that morning to get rid of that psychic and acid vulnerability. And next up is Morninglord's Radiance. This condition grants 1d4 radiant damage to your weapon attacks until long rest. This is a great condition to bring into Act 2 since there are so many creatures that are vulnerable to radiant damage. To gain this condition, you'll need to place the 4 ceremonial weapons upon the proper Dawnmaster altars. The battle axe can be found in the room guarded by the Guardian of Faith. The longsword is already placed upon an altar. The mace can be found on a random kobold looter within the monastery, and the warhammer can be found on the roof guarded by eagles. The warhammer's proper altar can be easily identified by the stained glass picture of the Dawnmaster holding a large warhammer near the altar, same as the longsword. However, to place the mace, you'd need to head outside the monastery and find the grave of Askill Stockhold and dig it up. Buried with him is a rusty mace and a note describing it as his weapon of choice. With this knowledge, you can then place the ceremonial mace or the rusty mace on his altar, which just leaves the axe for the final altar. Since your first time entering Act 2 forces you to take a long rest to keep Morninglord's Radiance into Act 2 or any of these Act 1 conditions, you'll need to first enter Act 2 without it for the first time, then come back once you've gotten an Act 2 waypoint, get the condition, and then just teleport back, and that way you will keep these quasi-permanent conditions. And next up is Weakened Constitution. This condition is one of the consequences of failing a saving throw while in the Zaith'isk. This is a quasi-permanent negative condition that can stack with other similar penalties depending on the ability scores of the saving throw that you failed. Each failure will give -2 to Intelligence, Wisdom, or Constitution accordingly. Prior to patch 8, this condition appeared to be permanent, but new text has been added to the tooltip suggesting if you consume a Mind Flayer tadpole, it will actually remove it. I never tested it prior to patch 8, but you can remove this negative condition by consuming a Mind Flayer tadpole, just as the description now says. And while getting awakened would be a much more ideal outcome from the Zaith'isk, at least these negative conditions aren't permanent. And next up is Loviatar's Love. This quasi-permanent condition grants a +2 bonus to attack rolls and wisdom saving throws if you have 30% hit points or less. It's quasi-permanent because the condition is lost upon death. To gain this condition, go along with Abdurak's ritual in the Shattered Sanctum by passing all 3 dialogue checks. A secret trick to help succeed these is to remove your armor. This grants you the condition Ardent Apostle, which gives you +4 to your rolls during this ritual. Alternatively, you can also play as a bard to automatically succeed in the ritual, or if you fail all constitution checks, you'll also be rewarded with the condition. And next up is the Dark Lady's Awareness. This powerful condition grants +5 to wisdom until next long rest. To get this, you'll need to solve a puzzle in the Shadow Cursed Lands, which reveals a passage underground. There you'll find a Sharan sanctuary and a number of statues to Shar. By interacting with the southeastern statue and passing a DC 14 wisdom saving throw, you'll receive this condition. Shadow Shadowheart as a Shar worshipper can skip this saving throw with a unique dialogue option. However, if the party has freed Dame Aylin, Shadowheart will no longer get a free pass and instead will need to succeed the roll, and she'll have to make it with disadvantage. And next up is the Dark Lady's Erudition. This powerful condition grants +5 to intelligence until next long rest. Just like the other Dark Lady condition, you'll need to enter into the secret Sharan Sanctuary, but instead interact with the northeastern statue and pass a DC 14 intelligence saving throw. Shadowheart again will get a free pass and not need to succeed the roll to gain the condition unless the party save the Night Song. And next up is the Dark Lady's Grace. This powerful condition grants +5 to Charisma. To gain this condition, you'll need to pass a DC 14 Charisma saving throw within the Sharan Sanctum by interacting with the center statue of Shar. If Shadowheart interacts with the statue, she can receive this blessing without passing that DC 14 saving throw as long as the Night Song hasn't been released. Otherwise, she'll need to pass it just like everyone else, and she'll have disadvantage. And next up is Mystra's Benevolence. This quasi-permanent condition grants Gale advantage on concentration checks. This Gale-only condition is earned by destroying Balthazar's ritual circle within his hidden room. Access to this room can be gained by placing Nere or Karlach's head into the pedestal, and although this is a Gale-only condition, you don't need to be playing as Gale for him to obtain it. Just have him in your party. And next up is Mystra's Blessing, one of my favorite conditions in all of Baldur's Gate 3. This condition grants Gale immunity to fire, acid, cold, force, and thunder damage unless the damage dealt exceeds 10 points. This can potentially mitigate a lot of damage when paired with other damage reduction. To get this condition, Origin Gale must choose to cleanse the Shadow Weave after defeating one of the Thorns. This can only be done once, and by doing so, this locks Gale out from the Shadow spell slot, a level 3 spell slot. Also, this must be done the first time when prompted because the option will not appear later on, and although you need to be playing as Origin Gale to get this condition, which is a bummer, it is really fun to get. And next up is Nightsinger's Favour, a powerful condition that many players have probably missed. This quasi-permanent buff grants resistance to necrotic damage until your next long rest. This can be very helpful against all the sources of necrotic damage within Act 2. To get Nightsinger's Favour, you'll need to succeed a DC 14 religion check at the altar to Shar in the Gauntlet of Shar. However, if you're Shadowheart, Shar decides to make this more difficult for you, and she must offer a little something extra than just a prayer to receive the blessing. However, any cleric in your party that worships an evil deity will automatically gain this condition without needing to pass a skill check except for Shadowheart. However, if you fail the check, you will be cursed with Shar Stricken. And next up is Seluna's Blessing. This condition secretly gives an amazing boon to your whole party, not even mentioned within the tooltip, which makes this totally worth getting. Seluna's Blessing grants protection against the lesser effects of the Shadow Curse, allowing your party to no longer need a light source when traversing the Shadow Cursed lands. However, you will still need the Pixie's Blessing or a Moon Lantern to pass through areas where the Shadow Curse is strongest. However, what the condition doesn't mention is that it also grants resistance to magical necrotic damage. This is incredible since there are so many sources of necrotic damage in Act 2. It is only magical necrotic damage though, and it is bugged, and Necromite's Reach from Beyond ability does full damage, but it's a stronger condition than you might have guessed at first glance. And next up is Myrkul's Gift. This quasi-permanent condition has been secretly improved and is now a completely unique boon. Myrkul's Gift grants 10 temporary hit points, and until you lose these temporary hit points, you deal an additional 1d4 necrotic damage with weapon attacks, and you have resistance to cold and necrotic damage. The 10 temporary hit points being the only thing keeping the boon on you is a bit of a downside, but if you give your whole party Shield of Thralls, then it can help make Myrkul's Gift last. To get Myrkul's Gift, you'll need to head to the Mind Flayer colony near the end of Act 2. There, you'll need to talk to Cressa Bone Daughter and pass a deception check. After passing the check, talking to Cressa again will allow you to gain Myrkul's Gift. Interestingly, if you don't have a tadpole, you'll actually need to pass a DC 16 persuasion check to gain the condition, and after you pass the check, anyone from your party can just talk to Cressa and get the boon without passing any further checks. And next up is the Githzerai Mind Barrier. This quasi-permanent condition grants advantage on intelligence saving throws until the character dies. Getting this condition requires you to have advantage on intelligence saving throws IRL because you'll need to solve the mind mapping puzzle within the Mind Flayer colony in order to have a chance to get this quasi-permanent condition. Once you solve the mind mapping puzzle, grab the waking mind and bring it to the interface beside the slack-skinned head. This will allow you to speak to the waking mind. And besides learning about the Githzerai, which I found super interesting, you can consume or purge the mind. Either choice will reward you with the Githzerai mind barrier, providing advantage on intelligence saving throws until you die. And next up is Rapture. This quasi-permanent condition grants a plus 1d6 bonus to attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws until long rest. This is actually amazing and is like an improved version of Bless. This condition can be obtained from Nisha within Sharess's Caress. When you encounter her, the flaming fist that she is with will transform into a mind flayer, slay it, and then by commenting on her apparent arousal towards the mind flayer, you can progress through dialogue and eventually be given Rapture. It's also interesting that each companion has a unique dialogue option at the bottom, each representing their truest desire. But be careful when selecting which character to speak to Nisha. The dialogue and Rapture condition can only be obtained once. Afterwards, Nisha will simply say she is not accepting new clients. And next up is Anointed in Splendour. This quasi-permanent condition grants a plus 2 bonus to all saving throws until long rest. Not a bad condition at all. To get it, you'll need to donate enough gold to one of the deities in the Stormshore Tabernacle to gain the option to ask for a blessing. The exact gold amount required depends on the character's level and the difficulty settings. The lower the character level and the difficulty, then the less gold needed. It maxes out at 5,000 gold for a level 12 character on Honored difficulty. Each character can make these donations so that your whole party has the condition. And while the condition only lasts until long rest, after you've made your required donation amount once, you can come back each day and get the blessing again without needing further donations, which is pretty cool. Now, surprisingly, Gale can get this quasi-permanent condition without any donation at all. If Gale chooses to ask for Mystra's forgiveness during their meeting at the Stormshore Tabernacle in the lower city, she will grant him Anointed in Splendour, no donation required. And next up is a quasi-permanent version of Bless that comes from none other than Queen Umberlee. Within the Water Queen's house, there is an offering chest. It can be found next to a giant fountain, and when you place any item, even 1 gold in it, you will gain Bless until next long rest. However, this can only be done once per party member, and the Bless condition will not stack with other instances of Bless. Not only that, but you'll also be rewarded with an inspiration called Offerings to the Waves if you have any party members with an Acolyte background.